My name is Maya. I'm 38 years old, and I work from home as a freelance forensic accountant. It's meticulous work, finding the ghosts in the ledgers, the stories hidden in the decimals. My office is a converted sunroom in our quiet Denver, Colorado home, a life I share with my husband, Julian, and our 7-year-old son, Liam. Julian is 42, the charismatic vice president of finance at Solara Innovations, a clean energy startup that's been the city's darling, attracting investors like moths to a solar flare. Our life was built on a foundation of predictable, comfortable routines. Until tax season, I was organizing our joint filings, a task I always handled. When I found the anomaly, it wasn't a single, glaring discrepancy. It was worse. It was a pattern, a series of small, consistent transfers, just a few $1,000s each, moving from one of our joint accounts to an offshore entity I didn't recognize. The transactions were coded vaguely, consulting fees, investment services, but the destination account was in a jurisdiction known for one thing: opacity. I waited until Liam was asleep, the house settling into its nightly quiet. Julian was in the kitchen, pouring his second glass of expensive scotch. "Julian," I started, keeping my voice level. "I was finalizing the tax prep and I found some transfers I don't recognize. A series of payments to an entity in the Cayman Islands." He turned, and the smile he gave me didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile he used in boardrooms, the one that managed expectations. "God, Maya." He let out a short, patronizing laugh. "It's just a complex trust for tax optimization. We're in a new income bracket, honey. This is just how the game is played." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "You're overreacting. Stop auditing my life." Auditing his life. The word choice stung, a deliberate jab at my profession, reducing my concern to a fussy occupational hazard. But it wasn't the words that solidified the ice in my stomach. It was the lie. I'm a forensic accountant. I know what tax optimization looks like. This wasn't optimization. This was concealment. The shift was immediate, subtle, but total. Julian, who once left his work laptop open on the kitchen counter and his phone on the nightstand, suddenly had them tethered to his body. His laptop was now shut and locked the second he stepped away. His phone, which used to buzz unanswered for hours, was now permanently screened down or in his pocket. When I entered a room, browser tabs were clicked shut, conversations hastily ended. The open architecture of our marriage suddenly had locked doors. About a week later, he came home, buzzing with an energy I hadn't seen in months. "Incredible news," he announced over dinner, beaming at me and Liam. "I'm being sent to the Global Energy Summit in Zurich next month. All expenses paid. It's a huge honor." He talked about it with a strange, almost manic excitement. He described the workshops, the keynote speakers. But something was off. It sounded rehearsed. It sounded like a cover story. My instincts, the ones I relied on to hunt down million-dollar frauds, were screaming. In my world, tax optimization and intense secrecy are the two ingredients that, when combined, never, ever signal innocence. They are the precursor to ruin. And he was my husband, the father of my child, and he was lying to my face. That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I waited. I waited until the house was still, until his breathing deepened into the heavy, rhythmic pattern of sleep, the scotch having done its work. I slipped out of bed. I didn't go for his phone. I didn't try to guess his new, complex laptop password. Passwords can be changed. Guesses can be wrong. I went to the closet in my office and opened the safe behind the bookshelf. I pulled out a small, unassuming device, a hardware keylogger, disguised as a simple USB-C adapter, a souvenir from an old corporate espionage case I'd consulted on years ago. I crept into the living room, where his laptop was charging on the desk. My hands were perfectly steady. I unplugged the power cord from the laptop, plugged the keylogger into the port, and then plugged the power cord into the keylogger. It was an invisible intercept. From that moment on, the tiny piece of hardware would record every single keystroke he made. Then I went back to bed and lay beside him in the dark, my heart a cold, steady drum. I would play the part of the trusting wife. I would smile. I would ask about his day. I would even help him pack for Zurich. I just needed to wait. I gave it 3 days. 3 days for that tiny, patient device to capture the keys to the kingdom he was so desperately trying to hide. The third night was the charm. Julian was in the shower, the sound of water drumming against the glass door providing the perfect cover. I gave him a full minute before I moved. I walked to the living room, knelt by the desk, and made the switch. The keylogger was warm in my hand. I slipped it into my pocket and replaced it with an identical, inert adapter I'd brought from my office. The entire operation took less than 10 seconds. I plugged the device into my own secured workstation, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The text file dumped onto my screen, a chaotic stream of every character he had typed for the last 72 hours, emails to his team, searches for restaurants in Zurich, messages to his fantasy football league, and then the login sequence for his encrypted drive, the password Liam 2017 Solara. I almost laughed out loud. It was so pathetic, a clumsy, sentimental combination of the two things he claimed to value most, our son and his career. It was the password of a man who thought he was clever but was, in reality, lazy. It was the password of a man who never believed he would get caught. I typed it in. The drive mounted, revealing a meticulously organized file structure, but I wasn't interested in the legitimate VP of Finance folders. I went straight for the hidden directories. There was no complex trust. There was no tax optimization. There was only a folder labeled SV Ventures. Inside was the digital architecture of a classic fraud. SV Ventures was a shell corporation, registered, just as I'd suspected, in the Cayman Islands. It had been incorporated 6 months ago. The small transfers I'd seen in our joint account were just the test run, the pilot fish. He was sloppy. He'd used our personal account to test the transfer mechanism before aiming for the real target. I navigated to a different set of files. The real target. He was systematically draining the contingency funds from Solara Innovations. These were massive, 7-figure sums intended for market volatility, for emergencies. To Julian, this was an emergency. He was the VP of Finance. He had sole signatory authority over these accounts, and he was using it to its full potential. He was creating fake invoices from SV Ventures, billing Solara for strategic market consulting and renewable energy futures analysis, services that were never rendered, people who did not exist. He was writing the invoices, and then, with a different digital signature, he was approving them for payment. He was the poacher and the gamekeeper. I opened a new spreadsheet, my own, on my own machine. I started pulling the numbers from the payment authorizations, the wire transfers. My breath caught. This wasn't a minor embezzlement. This wasn't a small-time skim. The totals climbed with sickening speed. 1 million, 3 million, 5. He wasn't just stealing, he was gutting the company. He was jeopardizing the jobs of hundreds of employees, the investments of people who believed in clean energy. I ran the final calculation. The number staring back at me was just shy of $8.5 million, and it was all being funneled to SV Ventures. The question burned in my mind. SV. What did it stand for? It wasn't a clever Latin phrase. It wasn't an acronym for some complex financial instrument. It felt personal. Julian wasn't creative enough for misdirection. He was arrogant. I scanned the rest of the drive. Most of it was dry, financial data, but one subfolder was buried 3 layers deep. Its name, a random string of numbers. It was out of place. My pulse quickened. Forensic accounting isn't just about the numbers. It's about the anomalies, the human behaviors hidden in the data. This folder was the behavior. It didn't contain spreadsheets or wire confirmations. It was full of pictures, screenshots from an Instagram account and a travel blog. The account name was Savannah Voyages. CV. My blood ran cold. I clicked on the first image. A young woman, impossibly beautiful and vapid, posing on the bow of a yacht in Miami. She looked to be in her mid-20s, maybe 26. The caption was a string of hashtags about living your best life. I clicked on the next. Savannah in Lisbon, holding a cocktail on a balcony. The distinct red-tiled roofs of the Alfama district behind her. I recognized the view. I went back to Julian's work calendar. His business trip to Miami had been 2 months ago. His fact-finding mission to Lisbon was 3 weeks ago. The dates aligned perfectly. Then I saw it. In the Lisbon photo, in the reflection of the sliding glass door behind her, was a man. He was holding the phone, taking the picture. He was blurred, but I didn't need a clear shot. I knew the line of his shoulders. I knew the watch on his wrist. It was Julian. He wasn't just embezzling $8.5 million. He was doing it for her. This wasn't a sophisticated plan for his retirement. It was a sordid, pathetic cliché. He was robbing his company blind to fund a new life with a 26-year-old travel influencer. And the Energy Summit in Zurich, I opened the Savannah Voyages Instagram feed again. Her latest post, from 2 days ago. I can't believe I'm finally going to see the Alps Zurich. Here I come. Blessed Travelgram, Europe. I closed the laptop. The knot in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He wasn't just a liar and a thief. He was a fool, and fools always leave a trail. I stared at the reflection in the glass, at the ghost of my husband. The knot in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The affair was the motive, but the money was the mission. My focus sharpened. He was leaving in less than 2 weeks. I clicked out of the image folder and went back to the main directory. A folder labeled Zurich Summit sat near the top. I opened it. My focus sharpened. Savannah. SV. She was the motive, but she wasn't the plan. The plan was still in that laptop. I clicked out of the image folder and went back to the main directory. A folder labeled Zurich Summit sat near the top. He was leaving in less than 2 weeks. I opened it. There was no conference agenda, no list of keynote speakers, no hotel reservation at a Swiss hotel. There was only a single, confirmed itinerary from a high-end travel agency. My eyes scanned the file. 2 passengers. First class. Departure next Friday from Denver International. My blood turned to ice. The destination code wasn't ZRH. It was GIG. Rio de Janeiro. Brazil. A country. As any forensic accountant knows, that does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. It wasn't a business trip. It was an escape. I read the passenger names. They were not Julian and Maya. They were not Julian and Savannah. The tickets were for Jason Stone and Sophie Stone. A new, bland identity for a new life. I checked the payment details. The tickets, costing over $20,000, had been paid for not by Solara, but by a wire transfer from SV Ventures. He was taking her. He was going to meet Savannah, fly to Rio under a false name, and disappear. The full, horrifying scope of his plan crystallized in my mind. He was going to drain the remaining money, the full $8.5 million. He was going to walk out of our house, kiss me and Liam goodbye, telling us he'd see us in a week. And then he was going to vanish. He was going to leave me. He was going to leave me to face the auditors when they finally discovered the black hole in Solara's accounts. He was going to leave me, the forensic accountant wife, to be the primary suspect. He was going to leave me and our 7-year-old son to deal with the lawsuits, the financial ruin, the public humiliation. He wasn't just running away. He was setting me on fire to cover his tracks. He was leaving me to face the consequences of his crimes while he drank caipirinhas on a beach with his Sophie. I waited for the tears, for the wave of grief, for the 15 years of marriage to curdle into a scream. Nothing came. The shock and the hurt were flash-frozen, replaced instantly by a rage so cold and pure it was almost peaceful. It was a clarifying, absolute zero. He really thought I was just the stay-at-home mom. He forgot what I used to be. He forgot what I still was. He forgot that I was the one who taught him how to hide assets. Back when we were young and ambitious and hiding assets meant shielding bonuses from taxes, not grand larceny. He forgot who he was dealing with. I did not cry. I did not go to the bedroom and wake him up. I did not smash his prized bottle of scotch. I went to my office. I unlocked my safe. I took out my largest encrypted hard drive and a set of forensic copying cables. I walked back to his laptop, my hands perfectly steady. I began the transfer. I didn't just copy the SV Ventures folder. I initiated a full bit-for-bit clone of his entire drive. Every file, every hidden directory, every deleted fragment. I mirrored his email server, capturing every faked invoice, every self-approved payment, every email he'd ever sent to Savannah. I copied the screenshots. I copied the travel blog. I copied the one-way tickets for Jason and Sophie Stone. I sat in the dark and watched the blue progress bar crawl across my screen. It was the most important audit of my life. He had spent 6 months building his escape. I would spend the next 2 weeks building his cage. Julian took Liam to a baseball game that Saturday. It was a father-son tradition, one I usually found endearing. That day, I found it useful. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I retrieved the cloned drive and locked myself in my office. For the entire weekend, I didn't just review the data, I synthesized it. This was no longer a personal betrayal, it was a high-level corporate fraud, and I was the lead investigator. I worked with a cold, precise fury. I traced the flow of funds from Solara's contingency accounts through the SV Ventures shell and into the final offshore accounts in the Caymans. I created flowcharts. I cross-referenced the fake invoices with Julian's server login times, proving he was the one both creating and approving them. I built a detailed timeline, correlating his business trips with Savannah's Instagram posts and the major wire transfers. This wasn't a collection of angry notes from a wife. It was a case file, an airtight, damning prosecutorial memo. On Monday morning, I didn't look up divorce lawyers. A divorce was about emotion and splitting assets. This was about asset recovery and criminal charges. I searched for Best Financial Fraud Attorney Denver. The name that dominated every search, every legal review, every high-profile white-collar case in the state was Tanya Harding. She was notorious. She didn't just represent clients, she eviscerated opponents. I booked an appointment for that afternoon, paying the $5,000 consultation fee without blinking. Tanya's office was on the top floor, a minimalist expanse of glass and steel. She was in her 50s, sharp and assessing, with eyes that seemed to have no patience for tears. I didn't offer any. I sat down, opened my laptop, and handed her a single encrypted flash drive. "Here is the case," I said, my voice as level as the horizon. "My husband, Julian, the VP of Finance at Solara Innovations, has embezzled $8.5 million. He is funneling it through a shell corporation to fund a new life with his mistress. He has 2 one-way tickets to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, for next Friday. He plans to leave me and our 7-year-old son to take the fall." Tanya plugged the drive into her system. She didn't speak for a full 20 minutes. She just read. She clicked through my report, my charts, the links to the invoices, the copies of the tickets. Her expression was neutral, but I saw a flicker of respect. "This is the most thorough intake file I have ever seen," she said, finally looking up. "The affair is, frankly, irrelevant. It's leverage for the divorce, but the $8.5 million is the real prize. And the crime?" She swiveled in her chair. "So, you have 2 options. You can go to the board, or you can go to the police." "I want to do both," I said. "I want him stopped." "Wrong." Tanya held up a hand. "You do either of those things right now, and you spook him. He gets a single whiff of this. He activates his escape plan. The money is already offshore. He'll be on a plane to Rio before the ink is dry on the arrest warrant. He'll be gone. And you'll spend the next 10 years trying to claw back pennies from a non-extradition country, while Solara's lawyers tear you apart as a potential accomplice." A cold chill went down my spine. She was right. So, what do we do? We pursue a dual strategy, Tanya said, leaning forward. First, we protect you and Liam. We insulate your legitimate assets. Second, we destroy him, but we do it on our timeline, not his. She laid out the plan. Step 1. We immediately and quietly set up an irrevocable trust for Liam. You have power of attorney. We will liquidate your joint accounts, your personal investments, everything that is legally yours, and move it into that trust. By the time he realizes, it will be untouchable. By him, or by Solara's creditors. I spent the next 2 days doing exactly that. The first firewall was built. Step 2, Tanya continued, is the bait. This is the hard part for you. You do nothing. You go home, and you play the loving, unsuspecting wife. You help him pack for Zurich. You need him to feel safe. In fact, you need him to feel extremely safe. I stared at her. You want me to let him go. I want him to think he has fooled everyone. I want him to get on that plane, because the moment he does, he's not just an embezzler. He's a federal fugitive. He's committed wire fraud and crossed state lines, and he's attempting to flee the country. We make the crime exponentially bigger. She told me what to do next. You are going to prepare 2 reports, based on this file. The first one is for me. It's the complete package. Everything. We will hand-deliver that to my contacts at the SEC and the FBI's white-collar division. But we will not file it until the moment his plane's wheels leave the ground. And the second report, I asked. A thin, cold smile touched Tanya's lips. The second one is for the board of directors at Solara Innovations. We send that one anonymously, 48 hours before his flight. Not the whole story, just enough to light the fuse. The SV Ventures invoices, the Cayman account number, the $8.5 million total. We want them to be in a full-blown internal panic. We want them to be calling his name over the intercom while he's sipping champagne at 30,000 feet, on his way to a country that will send him right back. My heart was pounding, a cold, hard drum. Brazil doesn't extradite. They don't, Tanya said. But Rio de Janeiro isn't his final destination. These tickets have a layover in Panama City, and Panama loves to cooperate with the United States. I drove 20 miles north of Denver to a busy, nondescript coffee shop in a strip mall, the kind of place with unreliable public Wi-Fi and a high turnover of faces. I paid cash for a black coffee, letting it go cold on the table. From a burner laptop I'd purchased for this specific purpose, I connected to the public network, routed my signal through an encrypted email service, and pulled up the report. It wasn't the full case file. It was just a taste. Tanya had been specific we didn't want him to run. We wanted him to scramble. I'd prepared a simple PDF containing copies of 6 of the SV Ventures invoices, totaling perhaps $500,000. I included the Cayman account number and the wire confirmations for those specific transactions. It was just enough to prove the theft was real, but small enough that he might believe he could talk his way out of it or, better yet, pin it on someone else. I addressed the email to Alistair Croft, the chairman of the board for Solara Innovations, a man I knew to be famously risk-averse. The subject line was sharp and impersonal. Serious irregularities in VP finance accounts, evidence attached. I hit send. I shut down the laptop, walked out, and dropped the computer into an electronics recycling bin 2 blocks away. By the time I returned home, the house was quiet, and I was just Maya, waiting for my husband to come home from work. Julian walked in just after 6, whistling. He was in a fantastic mood, the high spirits of a man just days away from abandoning his life for a tropical paradise and millions of dollars. He kissed me on the cheek, the gesture mechanical and meaningless, and went straight to the kitchen to pour himself a celebratory scotch. "Good day," I asked from the sofa, not looking up from my tablet. "The best," he said, his voice buoyant. "Just tying up loose ends for Zurich." We ate dinner. We helped Liam with his homework. We went through the motions of our dying marriage. At exactly 8 p.m., as I was clearing the plates, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The screen lit up CEO office. Julian's smile faltered. He put his drink down. Alistair, he answered, forcing a casual tone. He listened. The color drained from his face. What do you mean? Anonymous. He listened again, his eyes wide, and he turned his back to me. No, that's impossible. Let me take this in my office. He walked quickly down the hall and shut the door. It wasn't a gentle click. It was a slam. I followed, stopping just short of the door, holding my breath. I could hear the muffled vibration of his voice, strained and high-pitched. An emergency audit. What are you talking about? A long silence as the CEO spoke. That is a slanderous accusation I don't understand. My accounts, absolutely. I have nothing to hide. Of course I'll cooperate. 100%. I want to find out who is spreading these lies. Another 10 minutes passed. When he finally emerged, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He was pale, his forehead damp with sweat. He marched past me back to the bar, refilled his scotch, and downed half of it in one gulp. What's wrong, honey? I asked, arranging my face into a mask of wifely concern. He tried to smile, but it was a gruesome, tight-lipped grimace. Nothing. It's fine. He waved his hand dismissively. It's just stupid budget issues. The board is overreacting about a few projections. You know how they get. He was a terrible liar. He was agitated all night, pacing the living room, his phone bright in his hand as he shot off frantic texts. The next day, he left before Liam or I were even awake. He didn't come home until well after 7 p.m. When he walked in, his entire demeanor had changed. The panic was gone, replaced by a strange, confident swagger. He was actually smiling. You will not believe the day I had, he said, throwing his briefcase on the sofa. What happened? I asked, playing my part. They found it, he said, pouring his drink. The source of the problem. I kept my expression neutral. They did. Yes, it turns out some junior accountant in accounts payable has been running a side scam. Falsifying invoices, skimming a few $100,000. The idiot got sloppy. I stared at him. He had found his scapegoat. He was going to pin his initial, smaller transfers, the ones I had leaked on some poor kid in the finance department. That's awful, I said. It's pathetic. Julian agreed, his voice filled with a self-righteous fury that made my skin crawl. Alistair and the board were in a full-blown panic all day because of that anonymous tip. They thought the whole ship was sinking. He took a long, satisfied sip of his scotch. So, it's over. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a familiar, arrogant pride. It's better than over. They were so impressed with how I handled the crisis, how I was 100% cooperative and transparent. He let the words hang in the air. Alistair has asked me to lead the internal investigation, to root out the rest of the problem and find the source of the leak. My blood ran cold. He thought he had won. He thought he was brilliant. Solara Innovations, in a panic, had just handed the Fox the keys to the hen house. They had asked the man who was stealing $8.5 million to investigate his own crime, and he had just been given full authority to destroy any evidence that led back to him. The arrogance was staggering. Julian was now working from home, his flight to Rio just days away. He had set up a command center at our dining room table, a space usually reserved for Liam's homework and family meals, now covered in Solara's confidential ledgers. He was the picture of the dedicated executive, a man forced to clean up a subordinate's mess before his big European trip. He was loud on his conference calls, his voice dripping with synthetic integrity. I am digging into this David Miller's files right now. He'd boom, knowing I was in the next room. And I promise you, Alistair, I will find every last cent this kid stole. We will have full accountability. David Miller, the 27-year-old junior accountant who was now suspended, his life and career in ruins, the perfect scapegoat. My role in this farce was clear. I was the supportive, slightly clueless wife. I brought him fresh coffee, my hand brushing his shoulder. I just can't believe it. Julian, David, he always seemed so quiet. It's always the quiet ones, Julian said, his eyes scanning a spreadsheet. He was sloppy, ambitious, but sloppy. Now I have to build the entire case report for the board, showing exactly how he did it, step by step. It's a nightmare. The performance was almost impressive. He was energized by the deception, high on the thrill of his own perceived brilliance. He was investigating himself and finding himself innocent. That evening, I set the bait. He was rubbing his temples, pretending to be exhausted by the sheer weight of his investigation. "You look stressed," I said, my voice soft. I sat down across from him. "Listen, I know I'm just at home, but I am a forensic accountant. This is what I do for a living. Remember?" He looked up, his expression blank, not yet understanding. "Let me help," I offered, giving him a small, encouraging smile. "You need a report for the board. I can look through the data, find the patterns. I can find the things that nail David. You know, a fresh set of eyes. I can help you write the report." His face lit up. It was the look of a man who had just been offered a free, high-level consultant. He didn't see a threat. He saw a convenience. He saw his domestic assistant offering to use one of her minor skills, like mending a sock or polishing silver. "Maya, that's—" He actually smiled. A real, relieved smile. "That's brilliant. God, yes." "You're so smart about this stuff." "I'm too close to it." "Yes. Take a look. See if you can find the smoking gun that puts this kid away for good." He gave me his laptop. He gave me his password, the one I had stolen weeks ago. He gave me access to the entire server. He was the fox, and he was enthusiastically inviting me into the henhouse to help him frame a sheep. For the next 48 hours, I worked. I sat beside him at the dining table, a portrait of domestic collaboration. He was the grand strategist. I was his technical expert, and I built him a masterpiece. I didn't waste time looking for his trail. I already had that backed up and secured. Instead, I built a new one. I created a sophisticated, intricate, and utterly fraudulent evidence path that led, unequivocally, to David Miller. I used fragments of David's actual login credentials, which Julian, as VP, had access to, and wove a complex narrative. I showed how David could have created the Son V Ventures invoices, how David could have used a series of dark web tumblers to move the money, a technique far too complex for a junior accountant, but perfectly plausible for a terrified board to believe. But the report was a Trojan horse. It was my real case file, hidden in plain sight. On the surface, it was a 30-page airtight indictment of David Miller, but buried beneath the jargon, woven into the data, I embedded my logic bombs. To Julian and the Solara board, the report was a brilliant piece of forensic analysis, but to a real investigator, the kind Tanya would be handing the full file to, it was a coded confession. I used the exact transaction routing codes from Julian's real transfers, the ones I'd found in our joint account, but attributed them to David. I flagged server login timings that, on the surface, looked like David, but when cross-referenced with building keycard data, would show David was not even in the office, while Julian was logged in from home. I detailed the exact method Julian used to bypass the company's internal controls, but I wrote it as a reconstruction of David Miller's probable methodology. He was going to hand the feds a signed, step-by-step instruction manual of his own crime, all while believing he was signing the junior accountant's death warrant. On Wednesday night, just 36 hours before his flight, I emailed him the final PDF. "I think this is what you wanted," I said, as he opened it on his laptop. He read it, his eyes getting wider with each page. He scrolled faster, a slow, deeply impressed grin spreading across his face. "Maya," he breathed, turning to me. This is genius. It's perfect. It's airtight. They can't argue with a single word of this. This proves everything." He stood up and pulled me out of my chair, crushing me into an embrace. He kissed me, a deep, passionate kiss that tasted of expensive scotch and self-congratulation. "You're amazing," he whispered against my lips. "You saved me. You saved the trip." I had to physically stop my stomach from churning. I had to force myself not to wipe my mouth. I smiled, my skin crawling, and kissed him back. "Anything for you, honey," I said. "Now you can go to Zurich and not worry about a thing." Julian was dangerously complacent. He was now free to focus on the final details of his departure. With his investigation officially closed, he turned to the last item on his agenda, quietly dismantling our life. I monitored our joint accounts from the security of my own office. He was arrogant. He was selling off blocks of stock, initiating transfers from our savings. He was converting every tangible asset we shared into liquid cash. He just forgot that I was the one who built the lifeboats. With his investigation officially closed, he turned to the last item on his agenda, quietly dismantling our life. I monitored our joint accounts from the security of my own office. He was arrogant. He was selling off blocks of stock, initiating transfers from our savings. He was converting every tangible asset we shared into liquid cash, which I knew he planned to wire to his offshore accounts in the final 24 hours. He was scuttling the ship, making sure there was nothing left for me and Liam. He just forgot that I was the one who built the lifeboats. While he was busy pulling the plugs, I was busy transferring the cargo. Tanya had already filed the paperwork for Liam's irrevocable trust, a legal fortress he couldn't breach. Now, I filled it. I had power of attorney over our joint brokerage accounts. I logged in and got to work. Before his sell orders could even clear, I initiated my own. I liquidated our retirement funds, our remaining stocks, our long-term savings. Every single legitimate dollar that was half mine, every cent intended for our son's future. I transferred. It was all wired, clean and legal, into the trust. It took him 2 days to notice. I was in the kitchen making dinner when he walked in, his phone in his hand, his brow furrowed in that familiar, condescending way. "Maya, what happened to the Vanguard account? The balance is 0. I didn't look up from the onions I was dicing. My voice was steady, practiced. I moved it, and the money from the joint savings. His voice sharpened. "You what, where?" I finally turned to face him, my expression a mask of practical, wifely concern. "I moved it into a high-yield escrow account. With all that instability at Solara, I got nervous. I read the initial findings of your report, and the last thing we need is for our personal assets to get frozen if the SEC starts a wider investigation into that Miller kid. I thought it was smarter to have it somewhere separate and safe." He stared at me, processing. I was using his own lie as my cover. I was being the fussy accountant he always mocked me for being. His irritation faded, replaced by a dismissive wave. He was too focused on his $8.5 million prize to care about our comparatively modest nest egg. He had already written it off. "Right. Good idea, honey. Smart." He patted my shoulder, the patronizing gesture of a king to a pawn. "Good thinking." He left the kitchen, satisfied, already dialing his phone, no doubt to check on the status of his real money. The assets were secure. The digital evidence was secure. But I needed the final physical proof of his intent. I knew his real passport was locked in the office safe, but the fakes Jason and Sophie Stone. Where would a man like Julian hide the keys to his new life? I waited until he was on a long conference call, his voice booming with false authority as he discussed third-quarter projections. I went to the garage. It was his domain, filled with his toys. His oversized, monogrammed golf bag stood in the corner. It was a cliché, but Julian was a cliché. I didn't bother with the main pockets. I unzipped the large side compartment, pushing past the rain cover and boxes of golf balls. I ran my fingers along the bottom, feeling for a break in the lining. There it was. A small tear, deliberately widened. I pushed my hand inside the fabric shell. My fingers hit 2 hard, slim rectangles. I pulled them out. 2 pristine, dark blue passports. I opened the first. A photo of Julian, smiling, his hair styled differently. The name, Jason Stone. I opened the second. Savannah, her vapid, filtered Instagram face staring back. The name, Sophie Stone. They were real. They were ready. I took a high-resolution, time-stamped photo of both, then sent the images to Tanya's encrypted server. I slipped them back into the lining, exactly as I had found them. The trap was fully set. Now I just had to build my own exit. I went back to my office, to my personal computer. I used my own private bank account, the one funded by my freelance consulting the work he'd always dismissed as my little hobby. I opened a secure browser window and went to an airline's website. I bought 2 tickets. One way, Denver to Seattle. My sister lived in Seattle. She was the only person in the world I trusted. The departure date was Friday, in 3 weeks. The same day Julian was scheduled to fly to Rio. His flight was at 12 p.m. Mine was at 9 a.m. I spent the rest of the afternoon packing. I pulled 2 carry-on suitcases from the attic, small enough to manage by myself with a 7-year-old in tow. I packed only the essentials. Clothes for me, clothes for Liam, his favorite stuffed bear, my laptop, and the encrypted hard drive that held Julian's entire life. I zipped the bags and carried them down to the garage. I pushed them into the far corner, behind the lawnmower, and covered them with an old, dusty tarp. They were invisible. Just 2 more forgotten things in a house full of secrets, waiting for the signal to move. Julian presented the report I had written for him to the Solara board in a company-wide emergency meeting. I watched it from my office, the video feed muted on my second monitor. He was a vision of controlled, authoritative grief. He used my phrases: a rigorous forensic analysis, a betrayal of trust, and a deeply unfortunate, isolated incident. He accepted the board's gratitude with a heavy sigh, as if the burden of integrity were his alone. I just did what anyone would have, Alistair. I'm just glad we caught it before it did more damage. An hour later, the official email went out. David Miller, the junior accountant, was terminated effective immediately, with a note that the company would be pursuing all legal options. Julian came home that night walking on air. He was a hero. He had steered the ship through a storm, identified the rogue agent, and thrown him overboard. He was triumphant, his path to Rio de Janeiro completely clear. He believed he was untouchable. His arrogance was the final component. That night, while he slept the heavy, satisfied sleep of the truly narcissistic, I executed Phase 2. This was not a burner laptop in a coffee shop. This was the real, official submission. Tanya had provided a secure, encrypted portal used specifically for high-level whistleblowers to communicate with the SEC. I uploaded the full 150-page report. This was not a taste. This was the entire case. The complete annotated bank statements tracking the $8.5 million, the high-resolution copies of every fake invoice, the server logs, the travel itineraries, the screenshots of Savannah's blog, the high-resolution time-stamped photos of the Jason Stone and Sophie Stone passports, and as the cherry on top, I included the internal investigation report he had just submitted to the board, complete with my own analysis of how it was a coded confession. The file was sent simultaneously to Tanya's contacts at the SEC and the FBI's white-collar crimes unit. The pin was pulled. The response was faster than I ever could have imagined, and completely, terrifyingly silent. I expected sirens the next morning. I expected black sedans to pull up to our curb. I expected a phone call. Nothing. A day passed, then 2, then a week. Julian was happily packing his suitcase for Zurich, whistling as he selected his favorite shirts. The silence from the federal government was deafening. I called Tanya, my voice frantic for the first time in this entire ordeal. They're not doing anything he's packing. He's going to walk right onto that plane and disappear. Calm down, Maya. Tanya's voice was like ice, cutting through my panic. They are doing something. I just got off the phone with my contact at the SEC. They are not going for a simple embezzlement charge. They are going for the full slate wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy, and, most importantly, Flight to avoid prosecution. But he's leaving in 3 days. Tanya, that's the entire point, she said. They're watching him. They have the report. They have the tickets. They have the fake passports. They don't want to arrest him at his desk. They want him red-handed. They want to catch him in the act of fleeing the country with the stolen funds. They are going to let him get on that plane. Maya, they'll grab him at the gate in Panama. I hung up, my blood running cold. Panama. The entire plan, my entire future, rested on federal agents grabbing him during a layover. What if he sensed something? What if he changed his flight at the last minute? What if the plane was rerouted? If he set foot in Brazil, he was gone. I couldn't live with that variable. I couldn't trust the government's desire for a dramatic, airtight case over my need for a guaranteed capture. I needed an insurance policy. I needed one final push. I still had one card to play. A contact from my old consulting life. Ben Carter. He was an investigative bulldog at the Denver Post, and he owed me a favor from an old securities fraud case I'd helped him crack years ago. I drove to a gas station and used a burner phone. Carter. Ben, it's Maya, from the old Kestrel case. Maya. That's a voice from the past. What have you got for me? I have an anonymous tip, I said, my voice low and urgent. A massive scandal at Solara Innovations. It involves the VP of Finance. He was silent for a beat. How massive? Embezzlement. Offshore shell corporations. Potentially tens of millions. That's a hell of a claim, he said. The sound of typing already starting. You have proof. I have a source who does, I said, but they're terrified. They just want you to start digging. Ask Solara's PR department for a comment on SV Ventures. Ask them why their VP of Finance, Julian, is scheduled to fly to a non-extradition country next Friday on a ticket booked under a false name. I didn't give him the $8.5 million number. I didn't mention Savannah. I just gave him about 10% of the story. I gave him just enough smoke to start screaming fire. SV Ventures, he repeated, the typing getting faster. I'm on it. If this is real, your source is protected. I know, I said, and ended the call. The final piece was in motion. The feds were waiting at the finish line. I had just lit a fire at the starting block. Julian was now trapped between them. The clock was ticking. Ben Carter's calls to Solara's public relations department worked faster than a lit match on dry tinder. The SV Ventures name, combined with the VP of Finance and false passport keywords, sent a shockwave through the executive wing. Alistair Croft, the chairman of the board, realized with dawning horror that the internal report he had praised was not just a failure, it was an active deception. He wasn't the victim of a junior accountant's thievery. He was the dupe in his own VP's multi-million-dollar exit plan. The board's priority, as always, was not justice. It was liability. Panicked. Alistair did not wait for the SEC's quiet, methodical plan to unfold. He called the FBI's Denver field office directly. He reported that he had credible information, a tip-off from an internal source, that his vice president of finance, Julian, was an immediate and active flight risk, attempting to flee the country that very week with millions in stolen funds. The Fed's hand was forced. The quiet surveillance was over. Julian must have received a call, a panicked text from someone still loyal to him inside the company, or perhaps he just felt the sudden, cold shift in the corporate atmosphere. He came home that afternoon, 2 days before his scheduled flight, in a blind panic. I heard the front door slam, the sound of his heavy briefcase hitting the floor. "Maya," he yelled, his voice tight. "Maya." I came out of my office, my heart a steady, cold drum. "What is it?" "The summit," he said, not meeting my eyes. He was already pulling his suitcase from the hall closet. They moved it up. There's some emergency financial review. I have to go. Tonight." "Tonight?" I feigned surprise. "But I thought you had 2 more days." "I know. It's a mess. I have to be in Zurich by tomorrow. I've got to pack." He ran into the bedroom and tore open his drawers, throwing shirts and socks into the bag. He was frantic, his hands shaking. He wasn't packing for a business trip. He was running. This was his one and only chance to get out. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a long, quiet moment. Then, I walked to my own closet and pulled out the 2 items I had retrieved from his golf bag that morning. "Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. He froze, his back to me. "I was looking for my old umbrella in the garage," I said, walking slowly toward him. "And I found these, in your golf bag." He turned, slowly. I was holding the 2 passports, Jason Stone and Sophie Stone. The color drained from his face. It wasn't just pale. It was the waxy, bloodless color of absolute terror. He stared at the passports, his mind visibly racing, trying to compute this new, impossible variable. He lunged, trying to snatch them from my hand, but I held them up. "What is this?" I asked, my voice a perfect imitation of a confused, trembling wife. "Maya, give me those." He tried to sound angry, but it just came out as a desperate rasp. "Who is Sophie Stone?" It's not what you think," he stammered, his eyes darting between my face and the passports, his escape timeline collapsing in his head. It's a corporate thing. A corporate thing. It's a joke," he finally landed on, the lie so absurd it was almost impressive. A practical joke. For the guys at the summit, we all get fake IDs. It's a team-building, stupid joke. I held his gaze. I let the silence stretch. I let him sweat, his life hanging by the thread of this ridiculous, pathetic lie. Then, I let out a shaky breath. I let my shoulders slump, as if in relief. I gave him a weak, watery laugh. "A joke. You're telling me this is a joke." He saw his opening. He saw that I was, as always, willing to be the fool. He lunged for the narrative. "Yes, a stupid joke, God. Maya, you scared me." "My God, Julian," I said, pressing my hand to my chest. "You scared me to death. I saw these, and I thought you were running away with someone. I let a single perfect tear roll down my cheek. "Oh, God, I feel so stupid." He grabbed me. He pulled me into a hug, a cold, sweaty, desperate embrace. He was trembling, not with fear, but with adrenaline and a profound, bottomless relief. He had made it. He had fooled me one last time. "Oh, baby," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with false comfort. He was a terrible actor, but I was a better one. He pulled back, holding my face in his hands. He was trying to laugh, but it was a shaky, high-pitched sound. "See, what did I tell you? Stop auditing my life. You're always overreacting." He kissed me, a quick, dry press of lips. "I have to go," he said, his focus snapping back to the suitcase. "My car is coming in 20 minutes. "Okay," I sniffed, wiping my fake tear. "Okay, you go." He zipped the bag. He grabbed his briefcase. He rushed to the door. A man escaping a burning building. He stopped on the threshold and looked back at me. "I love you, Maya. I'll call you as soon as I land in Zurich." "I love you too," I said, my voice clear and steady. I looked him dead in the eye, my expression one of perfect, wifely devotion. "Promise me you'll get home safe." "I promise," he said, and then he was gone. I did not wait to watch the car service pull out of the neighborhood. The second I heard the front door shut, the deadbolt sliding into place. I was moving. The performance was over. I ran to Liam's room. He was fast asleep, his face peaceful, completely unaware of the earthquake that had just fractured his life. "Get up, sweetheart," I whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. "Wake up, baby. We're going on an adventure." "An adventure," he mumbled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Is Dad coming?" "No, honey," I said, my voice bright and steady. It's just us. I pulled him from the bed and grabbed the small superhero backpack I had packed for him days ago, filled with his favorite toys and a change of clothes. In less than 10 minutes, we were in the SUV. I retrieved our 2 carry-on bags from under the tarp in the garage. I pressed the button for the garage door, and as I backed out onto the street, I watched it slide shut. A final, definitive closing of a 15-year chapter of my life. I drove toward Denver International Airport, the car quiet. "Where are we going, Mom?" Liam asked from the back seat. "Is this part of Dad's trip?" "We're going to visit Aunt Sarah in Seattle," I said, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. "It's a surprise." My flight, the one I had booked under my own name, was at 6 p.m. His flight, the one booked for Jason Stone, was at 9 p.m. 3 hours. I had structured the timeline with forensic precision. I would be airborne, gone, a ghost, before he even sat down for his celebratory champagne. We moved through the domestic terminal, a simple mother and son on a Wednesday evening. We passed security without issue. We got to our gate, Gate A. We were early. Liam, now fully awake, was excited, pressing his hands against the glass and looking at the planes. I bought him an orange soda and a pretzel. We sat and waited. Finally, the gate agent's voice came over the speaker. "We are now beginning boarding for our flight to Seattle." At that exact moment, across the airport in the international terminal, Julian was living his own climax. He'd passed through security using his real passport, the document he needed to legally exit the country. He felt the thrill of the escape, the adrenaline of the successful con. He walked directly to the high-end champagne bar near his gate, the one with the view of the tarmac, and she was there, waiting for him. Savannah. Sophie Stone. She was dressed for Rio, not Zurich, in a white linen dress, her hair perfect. He dropped his carry-on and pulled her into a long, passionate kiss, a scene of pure Hollywood cliché. They were laughing. They had done it. They had beaten the system, the stupid, fussy wife, the idiotic, panicked board, all of it was behind them. They were Jason and Sophie, millions of dollars in the bank, and an entire life of freedom ahead. They finished their drinks and, holding hands, walked the few feet to Gate B, the final call for the flight to Rio de Janeiro, with a connection in Panama City. Julian, radiating an arrogance that was almost blinding, stepped up to the podium. He pulled the 2 pristine dark blue passports from his coat pocket and handed them to the gate agent. The agent scanned the first one. "Jason Stone." She scanned the second. "Sophie Stone." She looked at her screen, and her neutral expression faltered. Just for a second. She frowned. "Mr. Stone," a quiet voice said, just to his left. Julian turned, his smile still fixed on his face. 2 men, both in unremarkable dark suits, were standing beside him. "Or perhaps we should call you Julian Hayes," one of them said. I wish I could have seen it. I have replayed it in my mind 1,000 times. The slow-motion collapse of that triumphant smirk, the instant, agonizing computation in his eyes, the arrogance dissolving into a slack-jawed, primal terror. He knew, in that single second, that it was all over. Savannah, confused, tugged on his arm. "Julian, what is this? What are they talking about?" The agent quietly handed the 2 fake passports to one of the men. "These are excellent forgeries, Mr. Hayes," the agent said, "but you're under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and flight to avoid prosecution." As the first silver cuff snapped onto Julian's wrist, I picture Savannah finally understanding. I picture her screaming. Back at Gate A. I was holding Liam's hand as we walked down the jet bridge. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was Tanya. "It's done," she said. Her voice was crisp, professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath it. "Jason Stone is not making it to Rio tonight. He is in federal custody. The FBI has him, and the Panama transfer is irrelevant. They got him. A slow breath I felt like I had been holding for 6 months finally escaped my lungs. Thank you, Tanya, for everything. You did the work, Maya, she said. Go live your life. I'll handle the rest. I hung up. I stopped for a moment on the jet bridge, the hum of the aircraft in front of me. The future. I pulled my phone back out and opened a new text message to the man I used to know. I typed it quickly. You were right. I was overreacting. I should have sent the FBI the report 6 weeks ago. Oh, and no need to call when you land. I've already changed the locks. Enjoy your one-way ticket. I hit send. Then I powered the phone down completely and slid it into my bag. The flight attendant smiled at us as we stepped onto the plane. Welcome aboard. I buckled Liam into his window seat and then settled into my own. I took his small hand in mine. The cabin door sealed with a heavy, final thump. As the plane pushed back from the gate, I looked out the window, not at the airport, but at my own reflection. The plane taxied, turned onto the runway, and then the engines roared to life. We accelerated, a powerful surge pressing me back into my seat. And then we were airborne, lifting up and away, heading west toward Seattle, toward my sister, toward my new life. I left the burning, toxic wreckage of Julian's life, and mine, far below us in the Denver dark. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.